All right. Everyone watching this video, hello. Right, announcements. I completely forgot. Homework 1 for Frontend is due tonight. It's just a tutorial for some Bootstrap knowledge. All you need to do is follow a tutorial from Free Code Camp. Very good place to learn, by the way. And upload your final findings onto the Gradescope as soon as the assignment is up. So please go ahead and do that. Do not forget, it's kind of important to start practicing more and more. So do get that done. All right, with that, let's begin. So this is something we did last time. We had this new app function set up. We had function calls, variables, dictionaries, all of the good things. And we had a lot of these things here as well. We went through index.js and understood how app.js and index.js and index.html and all of these things connect together. All right. Do you have any questions about last class? All right, awesome. As always, if you have any questions, please add them in the chat, either privately or to everyone. It's all good. Okay. In that case, let's quickly continue where we last left off. We had this function, which we were calling a React component. And you'll start to notice that this idea of creating functions out of React is very much like the idea of creating classes in a language like Python or Java. And the idea of classes is again that you take a bunch of information and behavior, attributes and behavior, we say, and encapsulate it into one unit that is opaque. So it's a black box. That's the idea of a class. And here we're doing the same thing. App is something that does something, and it's isolated from everything else. Only app knows what it's doing. So I bring this up because there's something pretty insidious going on here. And I'm so sorry I have to tell you this, but this is not a function. This is a class. And I know, it makes no sense. It will make sense, no worries. So first, we went ahead and called these tags a function call. And now I'm calling this function a class. So what's going on? What's going on here? Well, something's going on here, and that something is known as Babel. B-A-B-E-L. Babel is a parser. It's a syntax extender that goes in behind the scenes and converts your, well, basically it converts whatever you've written into some other form. And React heavily relies on Babel. So this app call right here that looks like an HTML tag, but is with the word app, Babel goes in and changes this to be a function call. Similarly, when we have this, Babel's going in and changing this to a class call. And let's write down that class right now. It's very similar to how we've written classes before. You have a class, you have its name. There's something very special about this class. It's that its parent class is React.component. That is, it extends React.component. What is React.component? Well, it's a class in its own right that comes from the React package that we will insert right now into this file. Oh, it's already there. I just can see it. There you go. So this React package that we've imported has another class called component that has some properties. Here's one of those properties. It has a function called render. And now we're going to override that function in this class. What is render going to take? Well, here's the very cool part. Render is exactly the returning thing of your app. So whatever your function app returns goes inside of your render, like so. And now we can go ahead and comment this out. Beautiful. Now we can, of course, run this using npm start, npm start. All right, And there it goes. We'll give it a moment to and start running. Till then, any questions about this? Aha, there we go. Notice that nothing changed, which is pretty insignificant, except that we wanted nothing to change. So we're good. Everything's good. All right, so now that we've looked at this, let's quickly make some summary notes. So the name still remains the same. What we do is that we extend React.component, and everything that is inside the function goes instead inside a render. Why make classes when you could just make functions? Because now we can give this additional functionality. We can add helper functions. We can add a lot more things. So this is a good starting point to extending our React structure. All right. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat. I don't think I talked about this, so let's talk about this. What are these warnings that it's compiling with? What's going on? This right here is your React debugger, or rather, your React compiler. What it's doing is that it's taking all your React files, compiling them, and then listing the problems it sees. So here it says that a logo is defined but never used. That's because we're importing logo here, but its use, which should have been here, has been commented out. And here in index.jx, it says A is assigned but never used. Here's A that we were using for learning and testing that we're no longer using. So that's also assigned a value but never used. Okay. So that's a crash course in going from function to class. One quick last note before we dive into development proper, which is the idea of refactoring. You will do a lot of refactoring in React, simply because React is such a dynamic language. The idea of refactoring is rewriting code you have already written to kind of fit better to the code you are currently writing. So it will happen very often that you'll start off with a function and then realize, hey, I want to have a helper function right here. And you'll change that function to a class, or you write a class, but you'll realize there's no point to this being a class. You can do everything in just the render. So you'll change it back to a function. That's just, functions are technically considered better code writing. It's a little bit up for debate, so I'm not going to get into that right now, but you will change back and forth a lot. And you change back and forth a lot between who's taking the responsibility for executing something or displaying something properly. Should you put something in index.css, which is like a global file, or should you inline CSS, which we did here, like so? And all those things, there's no fixed answer. And your code will change as it grows. So don't be afraid to write and rewrite the same amount of code as your code changes. That's a good thing. Okay, on that note, let's get into development proper. What do I mean by that? We're going to do a little bit of a project. This is one of the most common starting React projects, simply because it's a very good place to start. This is actually recommended by the React team as a good place to start. So everyone, please open up the Notion. I will link it in the chat in a second. It is linked in the Slack as well. It is this React to Notion. We're going to download some files. Okay, so this is everything about what I said right now. Blah, blah, blah. All you want to go to is here. Let's develop. You want to go to these links and get ready to copy them. So if you open this, it'll lead you to a code pen. There you go. That's a code pen. And what you want to do is take this CSS, copy it, and let me share my entire desktop. This is unhelpful. There we go. You want to take the CSS, Control A, Control C, or Command A, Command C, depending on which OS you are currently running. go to index.css, Command A, Command B, or Control A, Control B. Right. So now we have all the CSS in index.css. Okay. We're going to do something similar. We're going to go here. We're going to copy all this code. And we're going to copy it over from this JS part right here down below. There we go. Lovely. One super quick note, if you are doing this in CodePen with the link that I sent, you don't need to do this. Right, so we're going to copy all of this. Very nice. We're going to go to index.js, and we're going to avoid everything up top, all of these lines. Instead, we're going to go from wherever our React code starts at the bottom and paste. So if you've done everything right, our code should look something like, reload, of course, this. You should get a next player X and a grid of 8 blocks, or a grid of 9 blocks, my apologies. All right, let's see. Everyone good? All right. One note, don't be afraid to override these files for a couple of reasons. Number one, because you can always re-download them when you run create React app. And number two, you're gonna write cool things anyway. So quick note about where all these files are. If you open your big React app folder, which for me is WDB app, then you can go to your SRC folder, and in your SRC folder, you'll see index.css. So both index.css and index.js should be changed in the SRC folder. And they should look something like this when you've updated them with these respective codes. Remember to not, and I repeat, not remove these few lines from the top. These 3 or 4 lines are pretty important. Make sure you keep them in index.js. All right. I'm going to give everyone, let's say, a minute or so to get this set up and going, and then we can start working on this. There we go. Okay. Okay. I'm going to assume that everyone has some part of it going, and we're going to jump right into it. So let's observe the code that we just threw out into our files first. First, let's discuss index.css. Let's see. I want to see if there's something super unfamiliar to us. there's a few classes, line height, font weight. You all are familiar with this. Are you guys familiar with the after special selector? I didn't do your CSS lecture. So any ideas, folks? Was after a CSS component that you guys were introduced to? Okay, that's okay. Even if it was, here's a good recap. The idea of after is that after every single component that is tagged board row, something is going to happen, which is that its content is going to be null, the display is going to be table, and the clear is going to be both. So some content is going to be inserted after the value that is already there. And here, because it's blank, it's just blanking out some value after the selected elements. Why is this being done? Well, we'll see. We'll play around with it a little bit in a hot second and figure out what's going on. So let's jump over to index.js and observe that as well. One thing that I'll immediately note is look at how the class name is given. It's not class. We're used to it being class, but that's not what's going on here. Nor is it class dash name, which is how you'd probably label things in CSS and HTML. This is because we are in JavaScript, which means we will follow JavaScript convention. So when we're giving a class name, it's lowercase and then toggling upper and then uppercase every single time. So we give class names like this. Similarly, if we had to do some styling here in line, let's say we wanted to do background color, it would be background color instead of background color. All right. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. Let's look at the board, what's going on here. It displays some next player value. It makes 3 board rows, board row. And then there's the game. Okay, so here's what's going on in our index file. The board renders some squares. In fact, it renders 9 squares and arranges them in rows. Pretty simple, right? Sweet. The game manipulates the board to change as the game is played. And the square is one of these displays. And it changes as the game is played as well. Okay, so now that we know what everything is, let's mess around with our index.css file. See what happens. Zoop, okay. Let's comment this out. This was the most suspicious part of everything. What happens if we comment that out? Nothing happens. That's interesting, isn't it? Comment some other things out. So the first thing we're going to do is comment out everything we assume is not needed. There's always a lot of things that are a little bit tangential, and we can always remove them and re-add them later if necessary. But it is important to keep our code light, which means that we are going to make things pretty light. We want square, we want status, we want OL, we want body. Okay, there we go. So we've reduced our CSS. Oops. You probably want to probably want to uncode the game. Otherwise, you won't get the 3-to-3 display. Again, don't forget, don't comment out the game. Otherwise, you'll get 1 row of things, not 3, 3, and 3. Okay. Any questions about the files that we have right now? Okay, then let's get into developing with them. So here's what we want to do, folks. First, we're going to fix this blank. What we want to do with our square is display X or O, depending on how the game is being played. So what we want to do is that we want to have some variable display being X or O, and then this just displays display. So now every square should have an X in it. There we go. That's awesome. But the problem is we don't want every single square to display an X. We want some squares to display an X, which means the square cannot hold the value of what it is supposed to display. That's a little bit of a confusing idea, so let me repeat that. Because there are some squares that are going to do one thing, and there's some squares that are going to do another. Here display O or display X. We can't have the square class determine what it's holding. Someone needs to tell the square class, this is what you need to display. And this sounds like a pretty familiar CS concept, doesn't it? This sounds like an instance variable, or rather, even more properly, an argument. This sounds like an argument to a function. You give a function an argument and you say, hey, print this, and the function prints it for you. So how do we do this idea of, hey, print this in top classes, React classes? Well, thankfully for us, React gives us something to do this for us. It gives us the props argument. And what is the props argument? Well, it's very familiar to how you tag HTML things, right? So you'll say in HTML things, value equals, say I. And what does this do? Well, it picks up this value right here and passes it as an argument to square. All right, awesome. How does square access this argument? Well, it accesses this argument through something known as this.props. So this.props is a big dictionary of every single argument and its values passed into square. So if we say this.props.value, it should get this value printed here. All right, and again, what is I? I is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and all these numbers right here. All right, what do you think is going to happen? Drum roll, please. Oh, look at that. To the power of arguments, we have displayed numbers into our big matrix here. And that's very, very cool. All right, any questions about props? All right, I'll pose a question. Why use this? Why say this.props? Why couldn't it just be props.value? Y'all have done some JavaScript and you've done some Python coding. You've done a lot of Python coding. So why use this? Well, it kind of goes back to the idea of these props. Yeah, they're arguments. You can think of them as arguments. Yeah, and so you're perfectly correct. Exactly. Thank you. It is because it's for that specific instance of the square. And as I was going to put it, it's because they're also instance attributes. Yes, they're arguments, but they're also instance attributes at the same time. Very confusing, I'm aware. But you can think of them as arguments that are instance attributes, which means that all of them are specific to this object. So you get the object through this, you get the object's props through this dot props, and you get the value through this dot props dot value. All right, awesome. Now, another motivating leading question for y'all. Why is React called React? Weird question, I know, right? But it's actually some theory behind it. So When we talked about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript really, really long ago, we said that HTML is kind of like, it's kind of like the material just lying there. And CSS is to make things look prettier and put it in place as we want it to. And the JavaScript is for responsiveness. React has taken that idea of responsiveness and put it in the idea of classes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these things and somehow make them interactive. To begin with that, we'll do something that will make this button, clicking this button, actually do something. If we were to do this in classic, not classic JavaScript, but rather classic HTML, we would do this as follows. Oh, we'd put quotes on click, alert, click. And now we render. Now when we click, I think I missed a semicolon, which is why it's being annoying. Now that we click, interesting. I haven't used this in so long. Anyone know why this isn't working? Did I mess something up? All right, irrespective of that, sorry about that. I am so not used to using strings anymore. But the idea is that you send it as a string and then it renders on the back end, and let's not do that. We hate strings in this house. Instead, and run React, so let's use that. So here's what we're gonna do. Instead, we're gonna use our friendly JavaScript braces that allow JavaScript inside of HTML, and we're gonna say alert, click. And now, aha, there we go. Tells us it clicked. All right. This is a bit of a complicated idea. Any questions? Oh, excuse me. All right. If you don't have any questions, we're going to march on ahead. So here's what we want to do, folks. When a button is clicked, we want to change it from, let's say, the number to X. How does that sound? Or rather, no display to X. So we're gonna remove the idea of sending in the values as a prop. Now we're back to blanks. There we go. And instead, we're gonna want to display X after this is clicked. So once this click happens, we want to display X in here. Yeah, to clarify, everything's blank now. This is because we removed the argument that we were sending in the prop that was here, and we commented this out. And now we have a blank slate. And what we want to do now is that every time we click, this changes to an X. Every time we click, this changes to an X. And it changes across clicks. So how can we do this? Well, let's try to do this the stereotypical way. Well, let's try to do this the props way, actually. Why did I delete that prop? That was dumb. There we go. And if a click happens, then your function should this dot props dot value equals X. Right, that sounds about right, right? If a click happens, then change the prop value to X and this dot prop dot value. Okay, let's render. Oh my God. Okay, let's see what happened. cannot assign to read-only property value of object. Well, we kind of expected this to happen actually. And this is because of one reason. Props are immutable. In fact, this is so important, I'm going to add a comment and write this down. Props are immutable. What does this mean? This means that you cannot change the prop dictionary by changing the value of the prop or something like that. I can't say this.prop is equal to blank dictionary. It won't like it. JavaScript would hate that. And similarly, it doesn't like this either. So now what do? Well, let's maybe make a variable for us, temp, that keeps this dot. This dot props dot value inside of it. And whenever click happens, temp becomes X and we can display temp. Oh, forgot to close this. There we go. Maybe. Let's give it a shot. Oh, there we go. Stop. Right, lovely, lovely. At least it renders. Oh, assignment to constant. My fault. Let's do instead let, which makes it variable. Constants don't change, variables do change. Okay. Let's try again. It's happening. Anyone have a guess as to why nothing is changing when we're clicking things? Yeah, it didn't render. That's absolutely right. So here the idea of rendering is coming into place. You may have discussed rendering when you discussed JS1 and JS2, but I'll bring it up again and kind of clarify things. The idea of rendering is that everything that you've written in the file gets thrown onto the screen. And once it's thrown, it's thrown. It doesn't change. It doesn't change unless you force it to change somehow. And that forcing it to change is the idea of re-rendering. The reason React is so powerful is because it allows in-screen re-rendering. It allows re-rendering behind the scenes. So you don't have to worry about how it's happening. You just have to know the keywords to make it happen. And TLDR, this didn't get achieved. If you reassign temp, that doesn't make things re-render. And if you could somehow force it to re-render even, everything would be recreated and the value would be repassed in and temp would be reset, which means this is not going to work. So we've basically exhausted a lot of ways to do this. Anyone have any other ideas about how to change the value being displayed? Any guesses? With the document functions. Oh, that's interesting. I like that. If you were in pure JS, I would encourage you to go and do that. Because we're in React, manipulating the DOM outside of React DOM kind of gets a little bit messy because then there's like two different things controlling what is going to be displayed, and then your own DOM functions are like fighting against your React DOM functions. So yeah, possible, not that recommended with React. Well, y'all probably don't know the answer to this because it was a trick question. There is no way that we have learned till now to be able to do this. So let's learn a new way. we're going to create something known as a constructor first. Constructor props. This is exactly like a constructor that you use in other languages, or maybe you've even seen this in JS. And like any good constructor, the first line needs to be a call to super so that React.component works correctly. So what is constructor? It's the initial thing that runs whenever you create a class square, and first it makes a call to super, which makes sure that React.component is working correctly. Okay, we're not using this in any way right now, so let's kind of figure that out. Here's what we're gonna do. Note how I mentioned that props was like a dictionary. Here, props would be something like value, the keyword value. In fact, let me string that up. The keyword value connected to the letter I, or the value of I, which could be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, right? So props is a dictionary. And props is an immutable dictionary here. So the obvious solution here is to make a mutable dictionary of some sort. And we're going to call this idea state. Props are sent down from some parent function or parent class, parent React class here, board, down to our current React component here, square. State is completely internal. A square maintains its own state. So here we're going to say state value is null. Why null? Because when it's not clicked, we want nothing to be displayed. Expected. Oh, right. You don't use semicolons inside of dictionaries. Duh. Okay, now let's fix this thing. So what we want to do is that we want to change this .state.value whenever a button click happens. So we're displaying this .state.value, and whenever a button click happens, we want to change this .state.value to X. Oh, I didn't write that. Whoopsie. X. Aha. Let's look at what that does. Have we got it to compile? Yes, we have, folks. Let's click. Still nothing. And the reason it's displaying nothing, well, we've already discussed this. So I'm not gonna go through asking you all what's going on again. I'll just blurt it out loud. What's going on, the reason we're not displaying anything, is because we didn't re-render. We talked a lot about the fact that we had to re-render, but we didn't ever end up re-rendering. So how do we re-render? Well, we're going to use the inbuilt tools that React gives us. Here it's giving us this .set state, and it takes in a dictionary. Here the dictionary is going to be value is X, and it sets this dictionary to state. Not only does it set this dictionary to state, it amends it to state. So if we had some other value going on, say random is 3, and we said set state value to X, it would just go in and change the value version and not worry about the random 3. Random 3 would still be retained, which is very cool. The best thing about set state is that it takes all this, makes changes to this state dictionary right here, and re-renders this component without re-rendering the remaining page. So you can imagine something like Facebook, millions of components going around. Imagine if Facebook had to re-render the entire page again and again and again every time a component changed or reacted in some way. Wow, that would be so tedious. And this is kind of made for that very reason. That it's almost impossible in something like pure JS to re-render a specific part. You have to re-render the whole page. The power of React is that it gives you the ability to just re-render one square when you're changing one square. So let's go and check this out. Are you ready? Look at that. That's awesome. Okay. So what have we discussed till now? We have discussed props, we have discussed state, we have discussed changing state, we've discussed set state, we've discussed classes, we've discussed React.component. Everyone on board with all of that? I'll pause here for like a couple of minutes. Please consider asking some questions or anything you may be confused by. We're getting into the meat of React now. This is the toughest React is going to be. And once we're up this hill, it's going to go super smooth. Okay, great questions, everyone. And feel free to keep adding them. This is question session for the next 5 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, even if you're like unsure about something that I said, ask. Let's talk about props. I think the best way to understand props is using a function component. So remember the app thing that we built before? Let's do that again. Oh, we don't need the render. Haha. Don't need the curly braces either. Need the circular braces. Which one? Hi. Oh, there we go. That looks simple enough, right? Now let's do something a little bit stupid. Nope, not this dot render. Return. This is going to be a nightmare. Oh, oops, we can't use app. Let's use app 2. Oh no. So now we just have a long chain of highs. So what if we wanted to pass in I into this? Oh, we're just going to say props. And then we're going to say props.value. And then we're going to pass in value as I. Would you look at that? Now we're displaying numbers. So TLDR, what are props? They're arguments. The arguments you're giving to your React component in the form of a dictionary. So whatever value you give it, you can just say props dot that name is that value. And it works very similarly in terms of classes as well. The only change is that this sending is implicit and you have to say this dot props dot value instead of just props dot value. All right, Hector, does that kind of help? If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. Lovely. Okay, let's revert. Okay, and so great question. So I will get you all to install this in a quick second, as in today. So let me just display this right now. Uh-oh. There we go. Let's see if I can pull it up. Components. Okay, lovely. So you guys see that? That faint blue outline that pops up every time I click something? That is just one thing re-rendering, a singular thing re-rendering. And that is kind of the power of React, right? It's just re-rendering that one square, everything else is retained. If you change this and do this through, editing the DOM with JavaScript, what's going to happen is that not just one thing will re-render, all the things will re-render. They would still sustain their value, but they would re-render, which is load on your internet as well as your network and your browser. So using React makes that rendering, repeated rendering, unnecessary. It only renders what is changed. And through that, your website is faster and better, more responsive because you don't have to wait that gap for re-rendering. Oh man, that's a hard word for me. Re-rendering. Okay. Enzo, does that answer your question? Do you have any follow-ups? Awesome. Anyone else? If you have any questions, let me know now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Let's take a break from coding. I've thrown a lot at you. Let's go ahead and install something. What are we going to install? You can see my 61C hard work. We're going to install React Devtools. Everyone Google React Devtools. You should get this chrome.google.com extension. This is available on Chrome as well as Firefox. How you can find it in Firefox, I have no idea. If you're a Firefox user, please, I'm sorry, you'll have to figure it out. So we're going to click this. If you are on React, feel free to follow along. All right, awesome. And it's already installed for me, but you can go ahead and click install right now. Oh, look, you're joining a club of 2 million people. Isn't that insane? All right. Awesome. So as you guys get that downloaded, let's talk about it super quick. What is this React DevTools thingy? Well, if you go to more tools and go to developer tools, you'll see your normal developer tools, elements, console, sources, very nice. But you also see components and profiler. Let's talk about them. So what components does is that it takes all of your components and arranges them for you in a nice drop-down selection. So there's a board component inside our bigger game component. Inside a board component, we have not 8, again, 9 squares. And each square has a value and a new entry and a random and a value. Look at that. And let's see, we're on stage 0. If I go ahead and click this, you can see the value updated in real time. Did you catch that? This was null and then it became X. That's very cool. Okay, let's also talk about profiler. What is profiler? Well, this is to kind of check the performance of your code and see how it's going. We are not going to use this much, but once you start developing on a bigger scale, this is going to be extremely helpful in checking how fast your code is running or how it's progressing and stuff like that, as well as keeping in memory how things are being rendered. So it just keeps a track of memory for you as things happen. I also want to take a moment and show you guys how crazy React projects can get. I'm gonna do something a little bit sus and open my Facebook. If you see some weird private messages, you're not allowed to tell anyone about it, okay? But that's not the point. The point is that I want to open up. Oh my God. Okay, there we go. I want to open up developer tools, and particularly, wow, this is slow today. I want to open up components. And once you open this up, you'll look at that. There's a million components in here. Facebook is, well, you may know this, Facebook is completely based on React. There's a million things in here. Look at this. It just keeps going and going and going. So yeah, React is extremely scalable. I hope that was a fun little demo. See how crazy it is. Feel free to like open random websites and scroll like React on them. It's my favorite thing in the day, if it's React based, of course. Okay. Any questions? Did everyone kind of figure out where React Devtools was? Are you still looking? Is there anything you're confused about? Can I help? Okay. If there's no other questions, I'm not gonna introduce this today. This is too big, and I think we're gonna need more time for this. We do have 25 minutes. Okay, last topic for the day. And after this, you are all free to go. So pay attention. Here is the thing, folks. What is currently happening is that each square is maintaining its own state, which is great. But there's an inherent problem with that, which is that we will never know if we won or not. Why would we never know? Well, because if each square knows what it's displaying, we have no way of knowing what the complete board is displaying. All right. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Does everyone follow that idea? Do I need to repeat it? All right. It's the idea of, I don't know if you guys have taken CS70, but I'm gonna give you a CS70 insight. So it's the idea of like, if you distribute a part of a password over 50 people, unless you can somehow make those 50 people meet, you're not getting the password back, because chunks of that password are with 50 different people. That wasn't really CS70, but you get the idea. All right, so how do we fix this? How do we make sure that we can get those chunks together? Well, here's the sad news. There is no way to make those chunks come together. The only way to make those chunks come together is to never distribute the password in the first place. But it is also a pretty useful idea. I think I mute myself. Very silent for a second. Sorry about that. They sometimes just stop working. Okay, as I was saying, the only way to get all the pieces of the password together are to basically not separate them in the first place. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to lift state up. What does this mean? Well, we're going to take state from square, where it is currently, over to board, its parent component. So we're going to lift state from square to board. Let's do it. To lift state, we of course need a constructor in board. And we also give it its own props. We don't know if board takes any props. Maybe it's an empty list, but we'll still do the needful. And instead of one square maintaining its value, we're gonna do a list, or rather an array of squares, which is all currently null. So we're going to keep an array of all the squares in one place. Right, and we're bringing back the idea of this value equals I rendering. What this is going to be as, let me quickly add a comment. This is going to be a list that's going to be like, oh, x, or x, null, and no, 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 and x, oh, oh. So TLDR is going to be like a 3x3 matrix filled with a bunch of values, strings or null. Right now it's all null in the beginning. So this value passing is again a little bit relevant, except that we don't want to pass I anymore. We want to pass the value that is at I. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, instead of giving just I, we're going to pass in this dot state. This here is the board state, states square, and with square, the ith square. Okay, cool. See what happens. Oh, nothing's changed yet because we haven't removed state from square. So let's go ahead and do that. State is no longer existent in square. We want to use this dot props dot value again. And here comes the big problem. How do we change the state of board from square? Does the problem kind of make sense? When the state was in square, it was easy to change because it's in here. You just make a function, give it no argument, set state, value x. Very nice. But now we want to change the state on clicking a square off board. This squares needs to be updated when this square button is clicked. How do we do this? Well, here's today's second big idea. You can pass in a value. Why can't you pass in a function? That's going to do something. I'm going to comment it out right now. And instead of any of this, just go handle click. Isn't that cool? And now all we need to do is define handle click here. What's going to happen is that the button gets clicked here. It goes to handle click. Handle click is somewhere here. Handle click. And then it changes board because this function is inside a board and can change things. Very cool. Okay, last thing for today. Let's write handle click. I agree. It is a lot of abstraction, and that does make it feel a little bit tedious. But oh my god, it ends up being such beautiful code. I can't complain. I love it. Okay. Last thing last. Let's write handle click. First, let's fix a few things, shall we? This is not going to be handle click. This is going to be this dot props dot handle click. Why? Because handle click is being passed as a prop. As you can see right here, we still have to define it, but it is being passed as a prop. It is a render. We don't need the constructor anymore, so we can delete it because it's not doing anything. What else? What else? What else? This dot props dot value is being displayed because state does not exist anymore. And now you'll notice square is yet again stateless. Convince yourself of this fact. Okay. So now the only thing that we need to do is somehow go ahead and write handle click, and we're done. So let's go ahead and do that. Handle click. Well, here's the thing. A handle click needs to change one of these specific squares. So it needs to pass in an I. This dot handle click of I. Why does this I work? Because when this function is defined, it is defined in the render square frame, and the render square knows what I is. So even if this is called here, it still goes ahead and picks up this I from here, which is super cool. So you can put a value in somewhere else, pull it out in some other class completely. That's super powerful here. All right, and now that we have a value of 5, let's fix this in some way. Let's copy squares over. Slice just makes a copy for us. So the state.squares has been copied into the variable squares. Then change the ith value to x. And then set state squares. Not the best variable I've ever used. Okay, question. Why don't we just go ahead and do I don't know, something like that? Well, that's because we want to treat state as immutable unless through set state. So the only way we are allowed to change state is through set state. Complicated? Very. Necessary? Yes, to make sure you don't change state and forget to render. So when you are changing state, it can only be through set state, which is why we make a copy, change the copy, and then set state to that copy instead. All right. I think with all those changes, excuse me? Oh, reloading. Let's see, shall we? And notice very carefully how you'll see the entire square or the entire 9x9 grid light up as blue. Every time I click, look at that. That is because the entire board is now re-rendering because the set state is on the board's state, not the square's state. That makes it slightly slower. Not perceivable to the human eye right now, but it does make it slower. So look at that. Okay. And now we have the structure of a game. We don't have the logic of a game yet. We're kind of going to do that next class. Well, we have all our basis to make a good game out of this. Oh boy. Okay. That was awesome. And that is the end of today's class. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope this was insightful for y'all. I know that was a lot of stuff to throw at you. This is basically all of React in one lecture, which makes it very difficult. So we're gonna go over this again and again in the next couple of lectures as well. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask. Feel free to ask on Slack or right now. Okay. Yeah, everyone, thank you for coming. I will see you this Friday. Have a good week. Bye. Bye-bye.